Okay, we're just a few minutes after our scheduled start time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Navigating Remote Depositions, Practical Advice from a Court Reporter's Perspective. I'm Mike Tisa, the Director of Litigation Technology here at Aptus Court Reporting. And today we're in for, if you'll let me use a phrase, we're in for a real treat. As you know, most of our webinars, if you've attended previous ones or paid attention or follow us on our social media channels, they've been very client focused in terms of the technical aspect of how to conduct a remote deposition, be it demos through our different platforms or just technical questions and some best practices on that front. Well, today, we'll just call it like this. The one constant thing that has remained in all these remote depositions is the importance of having a court reporter. Now, of course, the obstacle of everyone appearing remotely has challenged that. So today, we're going to be joined by Maggie Smith, a court reporter, to get her perspective from a court reporter. You know, what is it they're looking for? What are they hearing? What's some of the advice they can give us? And if you allow me just to give a quick intro to Maggie. So Maggie Smith, a real-time court reporter with 27 years of reporting experience, is a huge proponent of preserving the written record by licensed professionals. She's highly proficient in reporting complex cases such as patent infringement, high earner family law cases, and various other civil matters, as a matter of fact. And even before this pandemic, she is seasoned at reporting many video conference depositions. So with that, Maggie, if you want to join us, take your camera off, or turn the camera on, take your mic off mute. There she is. Maggie, thank you so much for joining us. I'm really looking forward to hearing some of the advice you could give us and our listeners and viewers today.
Thank you, Mike. I'm happy to help. I hope that we give some valuable information today that helps everyone in the legal field. I'm an independent contractor, and I really appreciate you providing this platform so that we can help everyone involved in the legal profession now deal with this unique situation of trying to keep commerce going while we're all in this pandemic situation. So I appreciate that, and I think you'll see some overlap from regular in-person depositions, and hopefully you'll learn something new or at least get a refresher. It occurred to me preparing for this that one of the greatest benefits, I think, from what we learned today and from actually implementing what we learned and performing remote depositions during this time, if you're an attorney or a firm owner, it demonstrates to your clients a disaster preparedness. And I think, having gone through this situation, that that's a real asset, and to show that you can still move discovery along with licensed professional court reporters with a certified transcript while in this restricted capacity. I think that's an asset to show to your clients, something you can put on your website and add to your credentials that you are disaster ready.
Well, thanks, Maggie. We certainly look forward again to all the valuable insight you're going to bring us. And just so everybody knows, again, this is a webinar, so I've disabled all the audio and video capabilities on the viewer end, but you can still submit your questions through the Q&A feature located at the bottom of the Zoom toolbar there. And while this is only scheduled to go a half hour, we'll certainly leave some time to get to all those questions at the end. So Maggie, interesting point I want to kind of make is you mentioned being able to tell your clients we can still litigate with the limitations, but with this technology. And even before this pandemic, you notice a lot of state bars requiring an uptick in the technology presentation, or the technology knowledge that attorneys should know. And I think this is a good step as, hey, not only is there trial technology or e-discovery technology, now there's actual different means to take depositions. And with this remote deposition technology, again, certainly looking forward to some insight that you have to give. And we'll just kind of start right off. You mentioned there's some overlap with what happens with remote deposition compared to an in-person deposition. Well, let's talk about the first thing that's perhaps done differently in terms of maybe procedure or admonitions when it comes to everybody not being in the same room.
Well, the obvious thing that we give the usual admonition, but it's more important in this setting, is to admonish everyone to speak one at a time. And so that means giving an extra long pause before the answer is given, before the objection is given, and before the question resumes. That's quite obvious. The other is we've got to speak a little more deliberately. I hope I'm doing that today for you so that we can make out the words a little bit better. And obviously to let the witness know that if they're not able to hear something, to give any kind of gesture they can. Sometimes it has to be a hand gesture. So for that reason, we do want to pay a little more attention to the screen. There is a little bit more of a role for the court reporter before we even begin the deposition, and something the attorneys can help with and their staff. And that is to provide a caption and a service list and maybe the notice of deposition that's going to contain the terminology. That's more important with these remote depositions than ever. That allows us to have that service list with all of the attorneys listed so that when you get on the line and we start to take a little bit of a roll call, we can just match you up to information we already have, as opposed to going through the tedious process of having you recite and spell your name. If we have a service list, we can match that up. In addition, it's a good idea to swap cell phone numbers before we get started with the deposition. With this format, many times the agency will provide someone like Mike with technical expertise who will stay on and monitor. But just in case you want to swap cell phone numbers so we can reach each other as we're all working from our homes. And then with regular in-person depos, usually the oath is what kicks off the deposition. In this case, you know, the rules differ from state to state for remote depositions. And so for that reason, I try not to be the expert in that. I just get I ask the attorneys to state on the record. First of all, I get everybody to identify themselves on the record. I get everyone who's participating in any way to state who they are on the record. Usually that starts with the noticing attorney, then the attorney representing the witness, any other attorneys, the witness, and then corporate representative or someone else in the room.
And Maggie, just to clarify, you're asking for a roll call, if you will, for depositions that, you know, back up. As you know, video deposition, when there's when there's a videographer, this case would be a remote videographer, they do their read on, they ask everybody to state their appearance. That part is normal, I guess. But you're saying even for those, even though people are appearing by video conference, but it's not being recorded, there's no video being recorded, you would like for all the participants to still verbally announce themselves. Is that correct?
I do, and I specifically say participants as opposed to anyone making an appearance. So then I want to capture anybody else who's in the room. And for instance, I had a remote deposition last week where it was of a minor child, someone under the age of 18. She appeared on screen, and when I went through this process of asking everyone on the record to state that they are attending, it captured the fact that the mother was in the room as well. And that's good for all of the parties to know, and that allows me to include that information in the transcript on the appearance page. And then I just have attorneys state too that we're taking this deposition using this format in order to comply with the COVID-19 restrictions. And that gives everybody a little bit of cover down the road to make sure that this is a usable product for them when, you know, hopefully it's a year or so out and we've all forgotten about this circumstance.
Sure, sure.
So those are the things that are going to be a little bit different before we go, or as we go on the record. And then ultimately I'll administer the oath to the witness, and then we begin as usual.
Great, okay. One thing I had a question about, you know, again, you being in person as a court reporter sitting at the head of a table, you're able to use your peripheral, so to speak, you know, a witness and then taking attorney, you know, you're in the middle of that. So now that there's like gallery view with Zoom where you can see everybody, that's great. You can see everybody talking, I assume, and
Mhm.
or from your perspective. My question is, I guess how does that differ from you when you're used to having it like you're sandwiched in the middle? Now you're looking at different screens. Is it better for you, different for you, or harder for you?
It's different. The, there is a little trick with Zoom. Once you've done enough, you start to realize that the person who's speaking, their little Brady Bunch box, so to speak, becomes highlighted with yellow. So the viewers should be able to see that now. That helps a little bit when there are multiple male speakers or female speakers in the room. For example, having a gallery view helps. And if you're able to get a little bit more of a face shot as part of your camera angle, that helps as well. Just to be able to see somebody's lips moving. Something to keep in mind if, you're a court reporter, especially, when someone enters the Zoom meeting, you have all the boxes appear like Brady Bunch style. But when someone exits the meeting, say on a break, and then they come back in, those boxes are going to shift. They'll likely shift. So don't rely on that so-and-so attorney was top left or so-and-so was bottom right. And that's where also when you join a Zoom meeting or a lot of these formats, you're able to put your name in as you join, and that helps to go ahead and put your full name in. You can even put your firm name as well. That's really helpful. What's helpful on this format is if you don't have a speaking role, to go ahead and mute yourself. And that'll help eliminate the background noise. And then your box won't highlight, and I won't confuse that you're speaking as opposed to someone else. But ultimately, the court reporter will clarify. If we're not sure who spoke, we will definitely guard the record, and we will clarify. But it's, the other thing that's difficult that's different for reporters with the Zoom meetings is sometimes the attorney and the witness are together and in the same room. If you can get both of them on camera, I know that's difficult with the social distancing today, but that helps as well.
Sure, and of course there are some states that aren't as, I guess, as strict as practicing the social distancing measures such as California or even some of the other states. But
right.
And in that instance where they are in the same room together and having to be that close on camera, what are some of the other challenges you've seen with that when they are appearing next to each other and almost having to sit on top of one another?
With an in-person deposition, a lot of times, the attorney is right next to the witness, and when the attorney wants to object, the attorney can just reach over with a little bit of an arm gesture or just put, his or her hand out, and the witness knows to pause and let the attorney get the objection in. We don't have that benefit with Zoom or other video conferencing formats. And so it's especially helpful to instruct the witness to pause before giving an answer so that the attorney can get the objection in. If the attorney is not able to get the objection in before the witness is answering, a good practice is just to let the witness finish the answer and then insert the objection afterwards. You can always make a motion to strike.
Sure. And I think that's important to note that not just with Zoom or most other video conferencing platforms, sometimes I know it's not ideal, even when you're in the room, an in-person deposition, there's crosstalk. Every once in a while, you can kind of pick up what's being said, even though there's crosstalk. Well, with these video conferencing platforms, the audio, as you notice, just drops out, so you can't hear anything. So some of the things we've been telling our clients in situations like that is, let's take a pause, question, objection, answer. But as long as you get it the way that you'll set out the parameters for how it's best to deal with that, I guess is what you're telling us, right?
And attorneys are used to that if they've done interpreter depositions.
Sure.
Because with an interpreter deposition, the answer was already spoken in English by the witness. The interpreter has to get that spoken on the record, or the answer was given in Spanish rather, or some other language, and then the interpreter has to give that in English, and the attorneys are used to waiting for that answer to be completely interpreted before they give the objection. So
Sure.
think about it in those terms.
It's a good analogy. Yeah, good point to keep in mind. Maybe if you can kind of sum up, what are some of the, I know we've talked some specifics, but other big challenges you've seen thus far that just in terms of remote depositions in general?
Really it's just the speaking clearly and deliberately, speaking one at a time. If the reporter does have to clarify, we try to do it in a fill in the blank kind of a format so that we get just that word that we were looking for, as opposed to eliciting new testimony from the witness. In that case, it's best if the clarification comes from the person who first spoke it, or to even just back up and start again. Or you can ask the reporter to read back what you have so far. One thing a lot of people like to do, I just had this happen. Madam Reporter, did you get that? And for the reporter as well, and the attorney, I could say yes, but we wouldn't have an agreement as to what it was that I got.
I see.
So in that case, that happens quite a bit. I've noticed that's a kind of a video conference habit. Did you get that? So I would either have the reporter say what she got, or allow the reporter to say that if you didn't hear it very well, likely she didn't either, and come to an agreement of what the record's going to look like by having the reporter say it, or reading the record back, or just starting over again.
Okay. Flip that. What are some of because you've been doing these remote depositions in high volume since we've started, even a little bit before this pandemic, but since this pandemic started, you've been doing a lot of these. So let's look at what are some of the best things you've seen, or some of the things that have gone smoothly, the things that have gone right in some of these remote depositions.
Oh, I think there's a lot of silver linings to this, actually.
Oh, okay.
I think this, I did a session of kind of rapid fire witnesses, and this worked great for that. We were able to set up different Zoom sessions or video conference sessions for each witness. And rather than going through the logistical challenge of having witnesses show up to the office, this was really great to just have people standing by. You finish a witness, start up with another one. Very good format for that. Also, and that was very productive. We spent more time getting on the record than had we tried to orchestrate everyone getting to the deposition. I've also seen a really good format for those out-of-town depositions. This is a good time to get all of those done where it would normally be costly. People are a little, the attorneys have been happy when they realized that they would have had to fly to get that deposition done.
Sure.
And, that's now costed. They don't have to bear during this time.
Perhaps promoting more awareness now, even though the technology isn't necessarily new, it's just being promoted in a much higher awareness, so to speak.
Exactly, and reporters all around have also really been rallying quite a bit. There's been a lot of online learning, getting up to speed, preparing themselves. Reporters all across the country are ready to report these depositions.
Certainly speak to that for some of our LA reporters who don't mind driving in that high volume traffic, for sure. Exhibit management. We've been saying, if you can get us the exhibits before, we have a copy of them here, we can get them to the reporter. Then of course you can present them in the deposition. You can also share the screen. Any issues there? Anything that can be done ahead of time to better assist you or a reporter in general when it comes to exhibits?
If you can provide them to the reporter in advance, that's great. We'll have them ready. And if we can compare our exhibit while it's being described on the record, that avoids any problems down the line. It's good practice if you do introduce an exhibit from maybe a batch of proposed exhibits to maybe start a new folder or rename that exhibit to show that it went from being proposed to an actual exhibit. So there's no mix up at the end, which exhibits were used. There are features where you can annotate an exhibit live. You can have the witness place an X on an exhibit, things like that. If you do that, it's a good practice to remember to save that exhibit with the annotations on it.
And that's something certainly you, for like yourself, might remind, but usually that would be from a tech standpoint to do that, just to make sure if anybody does save it, or the taking attorney standpoint to save that. That's something we try to cover in our demos. So certainly can do that. Does it, when a attorney shares a screen to share a document, all of a sudden, sometimes those boxes go away. Any difficulty or any more difficulty in the fact that you don't have the faces to look at when you're looking at just the exhibit and everybody goes into kind of a smaller thumbnail view?
Not too bad. It's actually helpful to be able to see the exhibit on the screen. This is something that can be a bonus with this format that we don't have with in-person depositions, because a lot of times with in-person depositions, the reporter won't even see the exhibit. It just goes from the attorney to the witness. So with this format, we get the benefit of seeing the exhibit on the screen, and that helps us follow that bouncing ball. And sometimes the case lingo and terminology is contained within that exhibit and the spellings, so that prevents us from having to struggle to pick up a name or a term or having to get that spelling later. So that's actually another one of those silver linings.
Sure. And just to clarify, you don't necessarily have to pre-mark your exhibits or label your exhibits as pre-marked, like 1- and a subheading. You can give exhibits like with just a naming structure, like articles of incorporation, notice of deposition, and then you would mark after the fact what exhibit number that is, just identifying the named exhibit, matching that up with the corresponding exhibit number. Is that correct?
Right, that's correct. So equivalent to the attorney showing up to the deposition in person with the box of folders that contain exhibits. You don't know which one of those you're going to use yet. And so when you're on screen, you can take it from being declaration to later just naming it exhibit 1.
Perfect. One last question before we start to get to some of the questions that are starting to come in here. Post-deposition. And okay, deposition's over. See you later. Just log out of the meeting. Should attorneys wait maybe a little bit to disconnect just so you have everything? It's good practice to be like, check in with you guys before they exit the deposition? All parties, that is, just to make sure.
Sure. Attorneys and the witness, a lot of times you take that last little break where you're just looking at your notes. That's when I try to remind everybody that when we do start to wrap up, stay on the video conference. The reporter is going to want to perhaps get spellings. Make sure you state your transcript needs on the record, whether you need a copy, a rough. We also are, a lot of agencies are doing originals by electronic means only now. So we want to get the email address for wherever the original is going, and to clarify how that's going to look for them. A lot of people are doing a locked down PDF that cannot be copied or printed or anything like that. We want to educate people how they're going to receive the original. It's going to look a little different today.
Sure. And thank you for that. And we're going to just hop into a few of the questions here. And we're having, I think some of it we slightly addressed, a lot of questions about exhibits and how they're actually handled. And we mentioned getting them to Aptus beforehand. We could set you up with some kind of cloud-based file sharing platform where you can upload them, and then we could, of course, disseminate to the court reporters such as Maggie. And then in the deposition, there is some screen sharing feature, which we'll be happy to do on a separate demo to show you how you can show exhibits and, of course, transfer exhibits within the deposition. And Maggie, you've seen some of this where there's screen sharing, and then there's a file share feature within the Aptus Connect Zoom platform where you can send it through the file or through the chat, and then you can download it or any party can download it to their computer. We can also send a link through that chat feature where all parties can copy that link from the chat and put it in a browser and view the exhibits that way. And just to clarify, you're not the one doing that. You have a rather important job doing other things in the deposition. That's something your tech can handle, or if the attorney who is taking the deposition feels comfortable doing, they can certainly do it themselves. Just a couple more. Okay. A lot of exhibit questions that we'll cover. Yeah. Some of the, do you have any tips for attorneys who are preparing to take a deposition with respect to preparing and showing documents to the witness? Yes, that would be more, I guess, on our end, Maggie, right? As you know, we're doing a lot of mock sessions and a lot of mock remote depos before they even take the live ones, so to speak. And that's something you can talk with us about. What's it going to look like to the witness? What's it, how do they get a copy of it should they need to? That's something we could certainly do in another in a one-off demo.
And I can add to that being that we're not dealing with physical copies that the reporter takes from the in-person deposition, for the reporter, a tip there from the reporter's perspective, a tip for the attorney is to take extra care to identify the exhibit that you're utilizing, give a full description, Bates numbers, just in case there's a mix-up later on down the road with what was provided electronically as part of the record.
And you mentioned there's a silver lining earlier, and somebody's kind of asking this again in the QA, but the rules in place now because of COVID-19, allowing for these types of depositions. Going forward, do you believe they will relax the rules so this will be more of a regular thing? I can answer real quick, and then I'll certainly want to hear your answer, Maggie. It seems like a lot of our clients and a lot of attorneys who are new to this are more accepting of it, being like, well, this may be the new normal, so I might as well embrace it now. So how about your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think there's a silver lining to this. I think that it could be a real cost saver for those out-of-town depositions. The more proficient you get with this format, then the more likely you are to use it. Maybe that means you can take depositions that you wouldn't otherwise put the money into taking. Just give it a shot. I would also recommend, this is a good chance for attorneys also to get familiar with real time. With this format, it's different from in person where you see the court reporter's hands on that steno machine, and you have a sense of when you're on the record and off the record. There's just a little bit more of a comfort level. I would recommend utilizing this time too to get up to speed with real time, and we can stream that live.
That's a good point. Yeah, I'm going to share my screen right now. You see that kind of a real-time demo of what you mean by real-time text streaming. This is something that can be added to the service if you request it before the deposition. So then you're getting a real-time text feed of the Q&A going on your question and the witness's answer and opposing counsel's question, all right here in one window. And somebody asked, this is kind of a dual feature here in terms of what you're seeing on my screen. It's one of the ways you can have other parties and the witness see the document. So you could bring up what you want them to see and you allow them to view it. And somebody asked if you could annotate it. And I'll just do something real quick on here. Yes, you can. You do have the ability to save or to annotate and then save that after the fact. So certainly something we can add on should you want the real-time software.
And that really gives you a real sense of confidence as to how the transcript is looking. If I do have to clarify something, I insert myself on the record. You may not see that coming in live. It's just going to be a little bit of a parenthetical that says I will insert it later. But it lets you see what the reporter is trying to fill in when we have to ask for clarification. And, the way I see the real time and its usefulness, the silver lining again in this situation is that when you factor in the cost of travel and parking and Uber and all of those other things in an in-person deposition, that frees up those costs. I think for the real time, I mean, you can come out sometimes where it's a wash or it's even more cost effective than if you were doing an in-person depo without real time. Now you can do the remote depo with real time.
Sure. Just a couple more going down the list and some good ones coming in. Our videotape depositions possible remotely? Yes, Maggie, you've done several of those already. You'll have a remote technician. They would isolate the view of just the talking head, the witness, and then you would get that synced after the deposition. I guess with anything, again, normal, just like a normal deposition deliverable. So we can certainly do that. And Maggie, you've been a part of that quite frequently. Let's see, just a couple others here. We have a few more minutes. Oh, and Maggie, we've been on this a couple of times already. First going out, how would you handle an interruption if someone's connection fails? The technician would then hop in, go off the record, get a hold of that person that was having trouble, and get them right back on. And Maggie, again, you've seen this to the fullest and in live action, so to speak, and that's what we're there for, right? The techs will hop on, get them connected, and then the deposition would proceed accordingly. Is that fair to say?
That's great, yes, and the reporter can help out when we all get back together again by reading the record where we left off. And if you have the real time, you can also see for yourself there that, where we left off. And that's also a good reason. Another tip is do try to pay attention to the screen. A lot of times attorneys will be in their notes and so forth, but try to have a little bit of situational awareness in that regard so that you can see if somebody has, there's now just a silhouette or there's nothing there. We'll try to help you with that as well.
Just a couple more as we're a little over our time, but I want to get to just a couple more questions here. And this is one that I do get a lot in the demos. Is the reporter always on the screen so the parties can see that she is still there? Well, short answer, yes, as long as she has her camera on, right?
Yes. And I try to get the camera positioned so that you can see my writer and a little bit of some hand movement. That's not always feasible. So I try to just give a little head nod like I'm still here. And we appreciate that you trust that we're getting it all down. Again, that's where the real time comes in handy as well.
Sure. And just a couple more here. Let's see. We do test everything ahead of time. So as you know, we test with all participants, the witness, taking attorney, and of course, we've always done tests with you. We've had our concurrent reporter training sessions. Here's a good one. I like, is this a good forum if an associate attorney wants to shadow a partner attorney to gain experience? I would say, yeah, we've had that a few times already. It's like, well, I can't go anywhere to the deposition. Why not attend remotely?
I was just thinking that earlier today. Yeah, this is a great way if you have a colleague or someone who's taking a deposition remotely, or you want to just contact your court reporting agency, get permission to just shadow. This is a great chance to take a look at doing that. And I really think that this is a good time to include this as part of your preparedness. I think people are going to start thinking about emergency preparedness in a commerce kind of way.
Sure.
Not just practicing for the fire drill and things like that, but how do we keep our commerce going and keep the discovery process going?
Exactly. Well, Maggie, thank you so much. Insightful as always. Great to talk to you. We certainly appreciate you being here and sharing all your knowledge with us. I know there are some questions that are still coming in, but we have to respect everybody's time. I'm going to actually share my screen with some contact information if everybody can see that. Maggie, can you see that contact information?
I see that, yeah.
So you can email me some of the questions that were not answered, and there's some other email addresses here should you want to reach out for anything else. Happy to answer them, and apologize for not being able to answer all the questions in a short amount of time, but email me. We will get those questions answered, and anything else you want to elaborate on, demos of some of these platforms. But again, today's session or today's webinar of getting a perspective from, as always, the most important person in the room, or whatever room they may be appearing in, the court reporter. So Maggie, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll have to do this again sometime. I think it was very insightful, and looking forward to it.
I hope it helped. I'm much more comfortable as a professional listener than having a speaking role.
Fair enough.
And look forward to getting back to that. But I did want to help out as much as I could. I hope it did.
Well, you did great, and I'll let you take lead for the next one. Sound good?
Thank you, Mike.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us. And this will be recorded and sent out and linked to you tomorrow. So thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you next one. Thank you.